Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ron, and today we are going to be doing a Plants vs. Zombies tier list. This one's going to be a little bit different though, because we're not just going to be ranking the plants as to how good I think that they are. We're going to be ranking them in how good I think they are in a sunless run. So this is without taking any sort of sun producers. No sun shrooms, no sunflowers. You can only pick up the sun off the ground, and you get no sun at night, which is heavily going to affect how this list looks, and it's going to look really different compared to how I actually think the plants are. I do plan on doing an updated tier list on exactly how I think the plants actually are right now. So let's go through each of these and put them in their own ranks. First up, we got the Peashooter. Peashooter only costs 100, and it's a pretty decent plant in any of the day maps. I used it quite a bit throughout my sunless run. It was still a little bit awkward. It still wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it was overall a pretty solid unit for having no sun because it only cost 100. So I would put this one up into A tier, at least on stage 1 and stage 3. On stage 5, even though it was a daytime map, it really wasn't that great. The night maps I never used it on because it was just simply too much and you only get 50 sun at night. So Sunflower, you got to go into D tier Sunflower because we're not using you. I guess you could use a Sunflower as a shield if you really needed to, but there's better plants that you could take for 50 sun. It's simply not worth it. Then we've got Cherry Bomb. The Cherry Bomb I think I used once or twice throughout the entire run. Now Cherry Bomb is pretty good because it does explode and it almost one-hits just about everything in the game. Problem is that it costs 150, and 150 is a heavy investment to just blow up a couple of things or blow up one particular thing. Usually I only use this for bucket heads, I think, and I only used it on like the first few stages, at least if I'm remembering correctly, and of course on like the mini games. So I'd put this one into C tier. I think it has some potential value, but not a whole lot on a sunless run. And then we've got the Walnut. Walnut's pretty solid. He only costs 50, which is really affordable, and he can body block for a lane, which is very important. He's one of the best body blockers in the game. And for 50, I think he goes up into A tier along with the Peashooter. I think he's on par with the Peashooter, if not better than the Peashooter. I used him pretty much throughout the entire run, even if I only used him once or twice, and you can use him on the night maps too, because he does only cost 50. Then we've got the Chomper. Chomper's just too expensive. He takes out one thing, which is great, so you can take out like a Bucket Zombie, or a Pole Vaulter, or even a Conehead, but then he becomes vulnerable afterwards, and he does cost 150 as well. I would rather use something like the Cherry Bomb to blow up multiple enemies, than just to have this guy take out 1 to 2 zombies probably throughout the entire day map. And he's completely unusable on night maps. Potato Mine. Potato Mine I think is going to be our very first S tier. Only costs 25, so super cheap to use, and he can one-shot just about everything in the game. That's very useful. You can plant him, and he does take time to set up to plant, but man does he do so much damage. It is only like a single target damage, but still, if you combine this with like Squash, you can kill the Gargantuans really quick too. Then we've got the Snow Pea, and Snow Pea could be useful. He really could be potentially useful because he's essentially 2 to 3. Actually, he's probably worth more than that in terms of Peashooters. The problem is that he costs 175, so you're not going to put him down first, and you're only going to really be able to use him on the longer maps. So the maps that have 3 to 4 flags, you could probably put down maybe a row of Snow Peas, and that might be worth it to you because the slowdown is pretty valuable. However, on most other maps, especially if you're just doing this as like a first playthrough like I did, I really never use the Snow Pea. I'm still going to put it into C tier because I think it has promise, but it's kind of limiting. Then we have Repeater. Repeater is 2 Peashooters in 1, which can be good. It definitely gets you more DPS throughout the lane than just having 1 Peashooter. It takes up, it's more space efficient, I should say. Takes up 1 spot and essentially counts for 2 of them. However, costing 200 and just to place that down for 1, that's a big investment, especially if your plant gets eaten. So I really didn't use the Repeater, and I think I would also put the Repeater in C tier on the low end. It might be okay on those 3 to 4 flag maps, but on the 1 and 2 flag maps, you're not going to even get enough sun to really use it, and it's really not going to be worth it. Then we move on to, I think, the Mushrooms after this. So first up, we got the Puff Shroom, and the Puff Shroom is definitely the MVP of a no-sun run. He is the way to go, and he's also just one of the best plants in the entire game. What makes Puff Shroom so good is that he costs 0. He also has a very fast recharge rate, which makes him really good too. This makes him viable on any strategy, and as soon as I got him from the night maps onward, I used him on every single map except for maybe 1 or 2 that I forgot him on. I think that was during the day maps in round 3. But other than that, I used him on every single map. He is great, even if he's not even attacking, because you can just put him into the front lines, make sure that he's a body so things are actually having to eat him. And if you can put him towards the back lines and on like the night maps, putting him in the first couple lanes is really good. You can just completely build the entire map just with puff shrooms if you're allowed to, because they are just really that good. They're basically Peashooters. They just have limited range. They only shoot for 4 tiles, I want to say. I think it's 4 spaces in front of them. Super good though for 0. Sun Shrooms, you got to go into D tier as well. You produce Sun, you're not allowed in this challenge. Get down there. I guess you can use them as shields like you can with the Puff Shrooms. They cost 25, so on day maps that might not be a bad option because they're a better body than the Sunflower to actually just throw something down if you wanted to body block there. The Puff Shrooms still make a better body though because they're 0 and they have a fast recharge, although these ones have a pretty fast recharge too. So I guess if you were just using them as bodies, they're okay for body shields. It's kind of a weird thing to do, but whatever. Then we've got Fume Shrooms. Fume Shrooms by themselves are actually really, really good, at least in the base game. Unfortunately, on a no sun run, though, they cost 75. That's just too much to be using. You can't really use these guys, at least at night. You can use them during the daytime if you want to put a coffee bean on them, and then they're 150, and they're still not terribly bad then. They're not terribly great, though, either. They do have the armor piercing, though, so I think with coffee beans, these ones might be like S tier. If you're just going to use them for like the night maps, where you can't use them on night maps with this run, then they're D tier. But again, this is a very specific thing for this specific challenge. Scaredy Shrooms are really good. Scaredy Shrooms only cost 25, so you can put up 2 of these at night, and I did that pretty frequently at night. And they're just Peashooters, and that's about it. Well, that's not just it, because they have their own ability of if any zombie gets close to them, whether that be in the lane that they're in or adjacent lanes, then they become scared and they won't attack, and then they're just a body sitting there waiting. So I'd put these Scaredy Shrooms actually up in A tier. I think they're pretty solid. We got Gravebuster. Gravebuster costs 75, so we're never going to be able to use him on night maps. He's only good on the first stage night map anyway, so just good for money, and we can't use him, so D tier. Hypno Shrooms, these ones are kind of okay, because again, you can use the coffee bean on him on other maps, and hypnotizing something like a football zombie is pretty good, or even hypnotizing a bucket zombie is pretty good. Unfortunately, it does cost quite a bit for you to do that. It costs 150 in total, so it's going to be slow. Again, maybe another C tier, maybe has some niche potential there, but not a whole lot. Doom Shrooms, kind of the same thing. They cost even more because they cost 125, and then you got to add another 75, so you're paying 200 to get a Doom Shroom out. But the Doom Shroom does blow up in a big radius. That being said, though, when are you ever going to take this over like the Cherry Bomb in this particular challenge? Probably never, because it's just 2 things that you have to get set up. So you have to take 2 separate things that takes up 2 of your seed slots. And you also need to wait for the coffee bean to go off, so this could potentially get eaten as well. It's just easier to go with like something like the Cherry Bomb. So you're going to go into D tier Doom Shroom. I love that you blow up like a nuke, but unfortunately, you're just not way great here. Then we've got the Ice Shroom. Again, kind of niche. It can freeze, which is pretty useful. I don't know. Well, it's going to cost you about the same as it's going to cost you slightly less than taking Peashooters, but it does freeze everything, so I can see some potential value with this. I'm going to put this one into C tier. Jalapeno, kind of the same way as the potential Ice Shroom, where if you can use it, it's pretty good because it clears up an entire lane, and it can hit both forward and backward, so even against like the mining zombies or against the Gargantuan when they throw their imp, you can potentially blow up the entire lane, which is pretty useful. You can also blow up the Zambonis with these, but they're not entirely necessary. I'm going to put Jalapeno actually up into B tier. At 125, it's an okay option if you need it. And I did consider using it a couple of times. I only used it maybe once throughout my No Sun playthrough. Up next, we got the Lily Pad. And the Lily Pad is honestly not terrible in this, at least in stages 3 and 4 when you can actually use it. You can put Puff Shrooms on top of it, which is pretty nice. And it's at least a body. It's only 25 sun body, so you can throw it out there and it will at least body block. And then if you put a Puff Shroom on that, you're putting 2 bodies in one lane, or at least 2 bodies in one space. And then you're also putting a potential defender on top of it, or at least another body on it. So the Lily Pad's actually pretty decent. I'm going to put it into B tier, just because you're probably going to use it, but just for Puff Shrooms to be thrown on top of there, and then you're going to put like C Shrooms behind it, at least once you get them. Other than that, it's a Lily Pad. You're only going to use it for those levels, and it doesn't really do much. It's kind of handy to have on this particular challenge. Tall Nut is next, and Tall Nut I really never used over a Walnut. I tried once or twice, but there was never a time where I wanted to take this over just another Walnut. Walnut was usually more cost efficient, and I could spare 50 sun. I couldn't spare the extra sun for taking this a lot of the time. I think it's a little bit above average, maybe into B tier, but I think it's on the very low end of B tier, high end of C tier. Tango Kelp is really, really good. Tango Kelp is probably another S tier for this particular challenge again, because it only costs 25, and on those night maps you can instantly kill things, whether that be the snorkelers or whether that be the dolphins, making your life just so much easier. And again, with 25, even on the night maps, you can take 2 of them, so really good. Lanterns, Lantern only costs 25 as well, and it does work as a body, but it's only good for seeing in the fog. So I really never took this over just spamming more puff shrooms into the fog, and then just kind of hoping for the best there, and it worked out pretty much every time. So again, probably another D tier. You're not really going to use it. Maybe C tier, because it does have some use. At least if you're, confident with how your placement is with your puff shrooms, and you don't really think you're going to need anything besides puff shrooms and sea shrooms during the night, it'll be fine. Next up, we got Squash. Squash is another S tier for this particular challenge. Squash is fantastic. It only costs 50, and it can one-shot basically everything. You can stack it with something like the Potato Mine and one-shot anything in the game. Well, I guess you're two-shotting anything in the game, and it's just great for clearing up things early on, because again, 50 sun to take care of something. You can take care of a cone head early, you can take care of a bucket head early. You can do both with the Potato Mine and the Squash. I used them pretty frequently. Not too much to say about them. They're just really good. Garlic. Garlic is another high-value plant. Not really when you get it, because you get it at night, but once you get to the roof map, and if you plan on doing this in like New Game Plus, which I think would be really difficult to do, but I think it would be doable, and Garlic would be one of the reasons why. On the regular game, I didn't use it too frequently, but it was very valuable. If I was doing it on New Game Plus, I think it would be even more valuable. So I'm going to put this at the high end of A tier, but I could easily see myself putting this into S tier, because it is just super valuable. It only costs 50, and it forces zombies to go down a certain lane. And if you can funnel zombies down 2 to 3 lanes, and you can stack things that deal damage in those 2 to 3 lanes, it's going to be far easier for you to deal with, because you can just micromanage your resources better. You can put all of your units where they really need to go, and you don't have to spread them out thinly and then hope that there isn't like a bucket head that shows up in your weaker lane. We've got pumpkins. Pumpkins are pretty much like tall nuts. I didn't really use them. I think they're a little bit more valuable than the tall nuts though, because you could always place this around something useful. Even if you just put it around something like your puff shrooms, it's still a wall right in front of them. It takes up the same exact spot. It's 125, so it is a bit on the pricey side, but I still think I'd put this like high up into B tier with the jalapeno. I could see myself using this, and I think I used it a little bit on the roof maps. Starfruit. Starfruit is really good too. Starfruit costs 125, but it attacks in essentially 5 lanes. Now, one of the lanes is going backward, so it's less useful there unless you have miners, and that's really about it, because you're not going to have like balloon boys on any of these, and if you do get balloon boys, it's just up to RNG whether or not you win that map, at least during the Sunless run. But on other maps, especially on the roof, I found this to be really useful, and I'd put this up into A tier. I imagine it would also be super useful in New Game Plus if you wanted to go through it, because they can hit in just about every lane. Blower's only really good against the flying zombies, so the balloon zombies, and it's good at clearing up the fog. The problem is that you only get fog at night, and that's really it. So you get 50 sun, this costs 100, so you're never really going to be able to use it. So into D tier it goes. Cactus, it's another thing that you get during the nighttime. It's supposed to be there to counter the balloon boys, and that's really all it's great for, because it costs 125, and it's not necessarily better than a Peashooter, other than against balloons, and that's it. If you're not against balloons, you're never going to take it, because you have better options for 100 or even 125 sun. I would rather take either the Peashooter or the Starfruit for that. So this one's also going to go down into D tier. Again, during the night maps, you can't even get it because you only have 50 sun anyway. Umbrella Plant, I really didn't find this to be all that useful. It has some niche ability where you can block the bungee zombies, but if you just keep spamming puff shrooms, the odds of any of your valuable plants getting taken are pretty low, and even when they do, you can usually replace them even just with puff shrooms, just because you can at least throw something in there to body block more. So I didn't find these super useful. They do only cost 100 though, so maybe somebody finds them a bit useful, and I think I'd put them into C tier because I do see that they have some use. Then we've got the magnet shrooms. You can't use these during night because they cost 100. which is unfortunate. You can use them during the day, and they're not bad during the day because you can take away the bucket heads, the ladder zombies, and the football zombies. So on New Game Plus, I could see these actually being pretty useful during certain maps, mostly with the roof and with stage 3, because I don't really think on stage 1, besides some bucket heads you might get. And then again, during the night maps, you're not going to use them. So probably another C tier. The Sea Shroom is another easy S tier. It costs 0 and you plant it in the water. Yes, you're only going to use it during the night map, at least on the regular playthrough. But if you're playing New Game Plus, you can use it during the day. Again, they don't cost anything, so they just work as bodies that you can throw in the water. And they're essentially just like puff shrooms that just spit out and they're free to use. So pretty useful. In the regular game, they're a lot less useful, but in this particular challenge, they're very useful. Spikeweeds are okay. I honestly thought they would be better than what they are. They can pop the Zambonis, which is a big plus to them. They do only cost 100, and they do decent damage, especially if you can put them in front of something like a Walnut. Then that's essentially the same as putting like a Peashooter there. It's even better if you can combine all 3 of these into one. But that can cost a decent amount, and usually I wanted to prioritize the Peashooters first, so I didn't use these as much, but I wasn't disappointed when I did get to use them. I think I'd put these up into B tier. Split peas, you get these to counter zombies during the night, particularly the mining zombies. Otherwise, they're just a regular Peashooter with a repeater on the back of them. Most of the time, you're not going to be using the repeater on the back, so they just cost a little bit more than a standard Peashooter. And I never really found myself using them. They do have some use though, so I think I'd put them on the high end of C tier. 3 Peters. You get 3 peas for 1 plant, which is pretty good. You get to cover 3 lanes. The main problem with these though is that they're super expensive. They cost 325 sun. That is way too much sun for you to be putting into just about anything. They're great to use on like the mini game, but that was the only time I used them, and there's just no way you can really justify buying them, at least on a Sunless run, unless you just get really good RNG, and this covers like 3 of your lanes, and then you can put another one down and it covers your other 3 lanes. Maybe that might work for you. I don't know. I didn't really try this. I thought it was a bit too risky. I'm going to put it into C tier, but tell me if you've tried that, and tell me what your results were. Torchwood, you're really never going to use. Torchwood is a good bonus because it gets all of your Peashooters even more damage, except for the, well, I guess it actually does technically get you more damage with the Ice P too, but it's really not worth it if you wanted to be taking the Ice P. Costs the same, 175, and the plant itself is not really doing anything. It's just a damage buff to your existing Peashooters, and I would just rather put down more Peashooters with having limited sun than taking this, so I think this is going to go to D tier. It's just too expensive for what you get. The potted plant is basically the same as the lily pad, so I guess I'd also put it up into B tier. It's another body that you can throw down. It's only 25. You can only use it on the roof. Well, no, you can use it on other maps too, but you're mostly going to be using it on the roof. And you can throw puff shrooms in there, so you can have potentially 2 bodies blocking for you if you really want to. That's not a bad strategy. It does make it so you at least have, you know, something kind of going on there. And of course, you're going to use it during the roof maps, but that's kind of a given. Cabbage Bolt is pretty good. I'm going to put this one up into A tier too. I think it's the same, or basically the same story as the Peashooter. It's a solid all-around unit. It only costs 100. It's great on the roof maps because it can attack from the angled surfaces. On regular maps, I don't know if it's as good as the Peashooter, but on the roof map, it's very useful. Corn is really good. Corn is actually really, really good. It's just it's kind of RNG dependent. So I'm going to put this in the high end of A tier because it does decent damage per hit, but it can also throw out the stick of butter. And if it throws out the stick of butter, that means it stuns whatever it hits, usually. It doesn't stun things like the Zamboni, I don't think, and it doesn't stun the pogo stick guys, which is pretty annoying. However, it can stun practically everything else, which is super useful because stalling out is really good on a no sun run, where you just need to buy as much time as possible. The Marigold you're never going to use. There's just no point. It costs 50, but it only gets you money. So it's great in like mini games and stuff. But when you're trying a challenge run, it's really not going to help you at all. The Coffee Bean is actually decent. I'd put the Coffee Bean up into B tier because some of the mushrooms that you can get are still pretty decent. You're still going to be spamming out puff shrooms, so if you get an extra 75 at any point, you can throw this out, and this can cover a lane where there might be zombies coming, at least regular zombies. It doesn't work really well when they have like armor or something. And of course, it does enable you to do certain things like getting a magnet shroom out, which can potentially get you a little bit more value, or a hypno shroom depending on what you hypnotize, or even an ice shroom. So it's got some decent choices there. Then we got the Melon Pult, again another plant that's just really, really expensive. This is 300. It does do splash damage, which is nice, but I think that's even less useful than the 3-peater, because at least the 3-peater will attack so long as there's anything in the lanes adjacent to it, or I guess the 3 lanes that it can cover. This one will not. It will just attack if something is in the lane that it's attacking in, and then if other enemies are around there, it'll splash to them, which is kind of nice, but it's just, it costs way too much. So like another C or D tier, I'm not sure where. Twin sunflowers, okay, we're not going to be using twin sunflowers because we're not going to be using one sunflower for this. The imitator is actually really good. Imitator is probably like S tier because imitator can mimic another puff shroom. So you can get twice as many puff shrooms or twice as many sea shrooms down as you want. Or you could even do it with something like the potato mines or the squash, and that way you can just take out big guys even easier. Imitator is really, really useful. Metal spikes, these ones are also probably pretty decent. I would imagine they're pretty good on New Game Plus because that makes it so the regular spikes won't pop after just one use. I think they pop after 3 uses of something like a Zamboni running over them, and it's just more duration on it. So if you could get away with using it, especially if you could put up like walnuts in front, they're probably pretty decent. I don't know if they'd be as good as the regular spike weed, but I'll put them in the same tier as that because why not? Corncob cannon. This one costs just way too much for you to be using on a Sunless run. Maybe if you had 4 flags, you could get away with a corncob cannon, but the reload time is really long on them, and it costs 2 corn for you to put down, and you have to put them next to one another, and then you have to put the corncob cannon on top of them. I think it costs 700 in total, which is an insane amount when you can only just pick up sun off the ground. So probably like C tier. The ice melon pult is probably the same way, another C tier. Yes, it's really good. Yes, you can spread out ice to multiple things, but it costs 500 in total for you just to get one of these. And if it gets destroyed by something, that's a lot of value lost there. Gatling peas, kind of a similar story. You're probably already not using repeaters on this, so Gatling peas is even more of an investment. Yes, they do a lot of damage per second. Yes, they're really good if you combine it with like a torchwood, at least for like holding a lane for the amount of space that you take up. Just taking up 2, you get a lot of damage out of that. They're still just way, way too expensive though. So another like C to D tier plant, I'm not really sure. Cattails, on the other hand, are actually really good because they can attack in every lane. They can also work on the balloon zombies, which doesn't really matter because that's going to be at night, and at night you don't have the sun, you only have 50. I don't even know if night would be possible on like New Game Plus because when I've been trying it recently with the mushroom run, we've gotten so many things that have just been spawning. We've gotten like 8+ balloon boys to spawn just during one mission, and that was really difficult even with being able to produce some level of sun. So cattails probably pretty good if you can put them out, but they're expensive, so I'm going to put them up into B tier. And get them out, I can see them being very useful. Gloom shrooms are extremely useful, again, if you can get them out. They're very expensive though, because it's 75 for the fume shroom, 75 for the coffee bean, and then 150 for the gloom shroom. So you're spending 300, but it does cover essentially 3 lanes. And gloom shrooms do a lot of damage per second, so if you can get them out, they're probably pretty good. I'm going to put it in C tier again, but I could see this being like B tier or even A tier if you can get a strategy that's working with them. It's just getting that amount of sun and putting them into positions where they're not just going to get eaten right away. That's going to be the real difficult part. And then the golden magnet, this is only for money, so you're not going to use it during a challenge run. D tier. This is where I think I'd put all the plants in Plants vs. Zombies, at least for a Sunless run. This is a lot of fun to do. Thanks for suggesting it. I really do appreciate it. I do plan on doing another one of these that's for all the actual plants in the regular game, playing it just normally. I would like to do an updated list on that since the last time we did it, which was like 2 years ago. Thanks everybody for watching this. I really do appreciate it. Special thanks to the supporters of this channel. These are my members over here on YouTube, patrons over on Patreon. They get early access to videos like this. If you'd like to be a part of it, there are links in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe. That way you get notifications whenever I post these videos. And if you would like to see more Plants vs. Zombies content, be sure to click right over here. That'll take you to a full playlist. Hope you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye!